The beeping of the heart monitor was the only rhythm in the room, a slow, grudging countdown to my own extinction. I stared at the sterile white ceiling tiles, each one perforated with a pattern of tiny, mocking holes. I tried to lift my hand, but it felt like it was encased in concrete. A different hand, cool and smooth, covered mine. "It's almost over, Marcus." My sister's voice, sweet as poisoned honey, whispered from my bedside. "Soon we can be together. Properly." Marcus, my fiancé. His thumb stroked the back of my hand, a gesture that once made my heart flutter. Now it just felt cold. "She was always so weak, Serena. You were right. It's better this way." My eyes slowly, painfully, swiveled in my head. I could just make out their silhouettes against the bright, indifferent window. Serena, my beautiful, golden-haired sister, was leaning her head on Marcus's shoulder. They looked like a painting, a loving couple keeping vigil. They were a lie. "Did you make sure the medicine was untraceable?" Marcus murmured, his voice too low for the nurses, but not for the dying woman 2 feet away. "I'd say, of course," Serena breathed. "Dr. Evans said it would just look like acute liver failure. A tragic, sudden illness. Everyone already knows how frail she is." Frail, the word they had branded me with my entire life. "Alara is too sensitive. Alara is too weak. Alara needs to be protected." It wasn't protection, it was sabotage. I tried to scream. I tried to claw at them. A pathetic, wet rattle was all that escaped my throat. My lungs were on fire, my stomach a knot of acid. The slow-acting poison they had been feeding me for 6 months, disguised as vitamins to help my frailty, was finally finishing its work. Where were my parents? "Mom and Dad are just so distraught," Serena said, a fake sob catching in her throat. "They're at home, preparing. They just can't bear to see her like this." Another lie. I knew exactly where they were. They were at the country club, finalizing the guest list for Serena and Marcus's bereavement wedding, which would, I was sure, be tastefully scheduled a few months after my body was cold. Why? The question echoed in the fading static of my mind. It was always about the money. My maternal grandmother, a sharp, formidable woman who had despised my mother's grasping nature, had bypassed her own daughter entirely. She left her entire fortune, a staggering sum, to me, her quiet, overlooked granddaughter. The trust was locked, ironclad, until my 25th birthday. My 25th birthday was 3 days from now. If I died without issue before claiming the inheritance, the will stipulated the fortune would pass to the next of kin. My sister, Serena, my entire family, my mother, my father, my sister, and the man I had promised to marry, had conspired to murder me for money. They had been patient. They had played the long game, slowly poisoning me so that when I finally collapsed, no one would question it. Serena leaned in close, her perfume, a cloying jasmine, filling my nostrils. "It's okay, Alara," she whispered, her lips almost touching my ear. "I'll take good care of your money. I'll buy that villa in Lake Como you always dreamed about. Maybe I'll even name a dog after you." Rage, a pure, black, cosmic rage surged through me, giving me one final, impossible burst of strength. My eyes snapped open and I stared directly into hers. She didn't flinch. She just smiled. A slow, triumphant, chilling smile. "Goodbye, sister," she whispered. The heart monitor flatlined. The last thing I saw was her turning to kiss Marcus, a passionate, celebratory kiss, over my cooling body. Then darkness. A vast, cold, empty nothing. If I had another chance. The thought was a scream in the void. If I could just do it again, I would burn them all to the ground. And then, light. It wasn't a heavenly glow, it was the cheap, dusty glare of the single bulb in my attic bedroom, filtering through the threadbare lampshade. I gasped, a real, lung-filling gasp, and shot upright. I wasn't in a hospital. I was in my bed. My old, lumpy, twin-sized bed. The walls were covered in the peeling, rose-patterned wallpaper I'd hated since I was 10. My thin blanket was pooled around my waist. I scrambled for my phone, the old cracked screen model I'd had in college. I fumbled it, my hands shaking. The date stared back at me. October 12th. 5 years ago. 5 years. I was 20 years old. I was alive. I was back. I stumbled out of bed and fell to my knees, my hands pressing against the rough, unfinished floorboards of the attic. I wept. I wept in terror and confusion, and then, finally, in a terrible, exhilarating relief. I was back, and I remembered everything. My death was 5 years away. My 25th birthday was 5 years away. The trust fund was 5 years away. Serena and Marcus were downstairs. My parents were downstairs. They had no idea. They just saw frail, weak, sensitive Alara, the family scapegoat. They didn't see the woman who had watched them celebrate her own murder. "You're going to pay," I whispered, the words raw in my throat. "This time, I'm not the one who will be destroyed. This time, I will be the one who waits. I will be the one who smiles." I looked at the date again. October 12th. I knew this day. Tomorrow was October 13th. Serena's 20th birthday party. In my first life, this party was my grand humiliation. It was the night my mother forced me to wear an old, ill-fitting beige dress so I wouldn't outshine the birthday girl. It was the night Serena accidentally spilled an entire glass of red wine down the front of it, to the roaring laughter of her friends. And it was the night Marcus, a new transfer to our university, had come to my rescue, wiping at the stain with a napkin, his eyes full of fake sympathy. It was the night my murderers first met. "Not this time," I said, a cold, hard smile touching my lips. "This time, the party will be so much more fun." I spent the next 2 hours in a fugue state, piecing together the timeline. My rebirth hadn't just given me a second chance. It had given me the ultimate weapon, foreknowledge. I knew my father's business partner was already skimming from the company, but he wouldn't get brave enough to properly embezzle for another 3 years. I knew my mother had a secret gambling addiction she funded by borrowing from my part-time job earnings and pawning family heirlooms. I knew my sister was already cheating on her high school boyfriend, the one her friends all thought was the one. And I knew about the stock market. I knew about the dot-com bubble that was still inflating. I knew about a tiny, obscure tech startup that would be bought out in 18 months, making its initial investors billionaires. I knew about cryptocurrencies, still in their infancy, still a joke to the mainstream. My family wanted my inheritance? Fine, by the time my 25th birthday rolled around, that trust fund would be pocket change. I wouldn't just take back my life. I would build an empire so vast that their pathetic, grasping hands could never even touch the lowest rung. The abuse had started so early, I couldn't remember a time before it. I was the difficult baby. I was the sullen child. I was the ungrateful teenager. Serena, born 2 years after me, was the son. She was blonde, blue-eyed, and bubbly. I was dark-haired, quiet, and watchful. Our mother, Isabel, saw in Serena the reflection of her own youthful, popular self. She saw me as a burden, a shadow. I remembered being 6. I'd won the school spelling bee. I came home, my blue ribbon clutched in my hand, bursting with pride. My mother was in the kitchen, cooing over a finger painting Serena had made. "That's nice, Alara," she'd said, not even looking at my ribbon. "Now go wash up." Serena made this beautiful painting for the fridge. Serena's muddy brown and green smear was hung with a special magnet. My ribbon was left on the counter where it was later knocked into the trash. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, every single day. When I was 12, I saved up $80 from babysitting to buy a telescope. I was obsessed with astronomy. The night I brought it home, my father, Richard, scoffed. "What a waste of money. Girls should be interested in boys, not space." A week later, Serena accidentally knocked it off the porch, shattering the lens. My mother refused to make her pay for it. "Accidents happen, Alara. Don't be so dramatic. It was just a silly toy." When I got a scholarship to a prestigious summer writing program, my parents lost the acceptance letter. I only found out months later when the school called to ask why I'd never replied. By then, it was too late. Serena, meanwhile, was sent to a $10,000 tennis camp in Switzerland, even though she hated tennis. It was for the prestige. My attic room wasn't a choice. It was a punishment. It was the former, maid's quarters, cold in the winter, suffocating in the summer. Serena's room was a palace of pink and white, with an ensuite bathroom and a walk-in closet. I was the family's built-in servant, scapegoat, and punching bag. And the worst part? In my first life, I had believed them. I had believed I was difficult, sullen, and ungrateful. I had believed I was frail. I had been so desperate for their love that I let them walk all over me, right up until the moment they danced on my grave. That Alara was dead. The Alara who woke up in the attic was a ghost, and she was hungry. My first move was to secure my escape. I went to my closet and pulled out a loose floorboard near the back. Underneath was a small velvet-covered box, my grandmother's jewelry. In my first life, my mother had found this box just after my 18th birthday and told me she would keep it safe for me. It was all pawned within 6 months to fund a trip to Vegas. I stared at the jewelry, the delicate gold locket, the sapphire earrings, the simple diamond pendant. This was my seed money. I slipped the locket and a pair of pearl earrings into my pocket. I dressed in my most nondescript clothes, pulled my hair back into a bun, and crept down the back stairs. My mother and Serena were in the living room, loudly discussing the tragedy of Serena's party budget. My father was, as usual, at the office. I walked 3 miles to the bus station and took a bus to the next town over. I found a pawn shop with no questions asked. The man behind the counter gave me a fraction of what the items were worth, but it didn't matter. $300. My next stop was a big box store. I bought a burner phone and the cheapest laptop they had. I paid in cash. I went to the public library. I used their computer to sign up for a new email address, one with no connection to my name. I used that email to open a new bank account with an online-only bank, routing the information to a P.O. box I'd rented. Then, I opened a brokerage account. I sat there for a long time, the fluorescent lights of the library buzzing overhead. I had so many choices. I knew the winning lottery numbers for a Powerball draw in 3 weeks, but that was too fast, too loud. It would draw attention. No, I had to be smart. I had to build it slowly. I took my $300 minus the cost of the electronics, and I invested it. I put it all into that one tiny tech startup. In my past life, I'd read an article about its founders, how they'd almost gone bankrupt before a sudden, shocking buyout by a tech giant. That buyout was 18 months away. This was just the start. I took the bus back, sneaking into the house just as quietly as I'd left. I hid the laptop and phone under the same loose floorboard. I went downstairs. My mother was on the phone, her voice high and stressed. But Richard, she has to have the ice sculpture. How can she have a 20th birthday party without an ice sculpture? I walked into the kitchen and I opened the fridge. Alara, where have you been? My mother snapped, covering the receiver. You're supposed to be helping your sister address envelopes. I went for a walk, I said, my voice flat. A walk? For 3 hours? You're so selfish. Serena is stressed to death. I pulled out a bottle of water and met her gaze. I didn't flinch. I didn't apologize. I just looked at her. A strange expression crossed her face. Annoyance, then a flash of uncertainty. She was used to me cowering. This new, steady gaze unnerved her. Well, don't just stand there, she snapped, turning back to her call. Go help your sister. I walked past her, up to Serena's palace. My sister was splayed on her chaise lounge, filing her nails, a pile of envelopes on the floor beside her. Finally, she huffed. My hand is cramping. You can do the rest. And do them neatly. Marcus is coming tomorrow, and I want him to be impressed. Marcus? My murderer. Okay, Serena, I said, my voice smooth as silk. I sat on the floor and picked up an envelope. And don't wear that awful beige thing tomorrow, she said, not looking at me. Mom's getting you something more appropriate. We can't have you embarrassing me. Of course not, I said. I wrote an address in perfect, clean cursive. By the way, I heard you telling Mom you were worried about your history paper, the one on the French Revolution. She sat up, intrigued. Yeah, it's due on Monday. It's so boring. I just finished a paper on the same topic for my class. I lied. I got an A plus. I can help you with yours if you want. Serena's eyes lit up. She was a terrible student. You do that? Oh my God, Alara, you're a lifesaver. Anything for you, sis, I said, smiling. We need to stick together, right? She would plagiarize my paper. She would get an A. The professor would praise her. And in 2 months, when the real final paper was due, she would be so overconfident she wouldn't even study, and she would fail the final, knocking her out of the running for the dean's list she so desperately wanted. One cut. 1,000 to go. The next night, the night of the party, was a masterpiece. My mother presented me with the appropriate dress. It was a shapeless mud-brown sack that looked like it had been salvaged from a church donation bin. Oh, Mom, it's lovely, I said, holding it up with a plastic smile. It'll do, she said, satisfied. We want Serena to be the star. I went up to my attic room and threw the dress in the trash. Then, from under my bed, I pulled out a bag. The night before, after everyone was asleep, I had borrowed my mother's emergency credit card, the one she kept hidden in her jewelry box. I'd gone to an all-night department store and bought a dress. It wasn't expensive, but it was perfect. A simple, deep crimson sheath that fit me like a glove. It brought out the dark highlights in my hair and made my skin glow. It was the anti-beige. I did my hair, I did my makeup, using the good quality products I'd bought with the credit card. Items I would later report as stolen from my gym locker. When I walked down the stairs, the music stopped. Not really, but it felt like it. My mother's jaw dropped. Alara, where did you get that? It's just something I had, I said with a shrug. You said the beige one wasn't right. It's red, she sputtered. It's her birthday party, not her wedding, a voice said. Marcus. He was standing by the punch bowl just as I remembered, tall, handsome, with that deceptively kind smile. He looked at me, his eyes filled with an appreciation that was all too real. In my past life, this look had made me melt. Now it made me want to vomit. You look amazing, Alara, he said. Thank you, Marcus, I said, giving him a polite, distant smile. I walked right past him and went to the food table. Serena, across the room in her glittering silver sequined and ridiculously expensive dress, was fuming. She had been lapping up the attention, and I had just stolen her spotlight. I watched her from the corner of my eye. I saw her whisper to her friends. I saw her grab a glass of red wine. I saw her start to move toward me, her eyes locked on my dress, a clumsy, malicious accident already forming in her mind. I picked up a plate of pigs in a blanket and turned to walk toward the patio. As she intercepted me, I tripped over the rug. I went flying. The plate of greasy appetizers sailed through the air, and my body collided hard with Serena's. The red wine she was holding didn't just spill, it arced, splashing in a perfect, dramatic wave all over her. It hit her dress, a $2,000 designer monstrosity, and it hit our mother, who was standing right next to her. A collective, horrified gasp filled the room. Serena looked down. The silver sequins were now stained a deep, horrifying burgundy. She let out a shriek that could have shattered glass. Oh my gosh, I cried, scrambling to my feet. Serena! Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I'm just so clumsy. I echoed the exact words my mother had used on me for years. My mother, her own pale blue chiffon dress now sporting a matching stain, looked like she was going to have an aneurysm. Alara, you stupid, clumsy girl. I know, I wailed, putting my hands to my face to hide my smile. I've ruined everything, just like you always said I do. Marcus rushed over, but not to me. He went to Serena, dabbing at her dress with a cocktail napkin, which only smeared the stain. It's fine, fine, he said, shooting me a look of pure annoyance. It's not fine, Serena sobbed, pushing him away and running up the stairs. The party was over. The ice sculpture, which had arrived late, was melting on the lawn. My mother was hissing at my father to do something, and he was just staring at the stain on her dress, a look of profound bewilderment on his face. I slipped out the back door, my heart hammering with a wild, triumphant joy. It was a small, petty victory, but it was the first, and it was delicious. The next 5 years were a blur of strategic, patient warfare. I moved out of the attic and into a university dorm 2 weeks later, funded by a combination of stolen cash from my mother's purse and a series of brilliant, small-scale stock flips. I told my parents I'd won a surprise scholarship that covered room and board. They didn't question it. They were just glad to have me out of the house, especially after the party incident. My separation was my salvation. I double majored in finance and computer science. I was a ghost on campus. I didn't go to parties. I didn't date. I studied, I traded, and I planned. My 18-month investment in the tech startup paid off, just as I knew it would. My initial $300, bolstered by other small investments, turned into just over $1.5 million. I didn't touch it. I funneled it through anonymous shell corporations, a trick I'd learned from my advanced finance classes, and began investing in earnest. I bought into crypto. I bought land in an area I knew would be gentrified. I started a small tech consulting firm under a proxy CEO, a brilliant older woman named Cynthia, who had been downsized from a major corporation. I hired her, gave her equity, and let her be the face of the company. Our product was simple. We used my foreknowledge to predict market trends and solve security and logistics problems for clients before they happened. We were hailed as visionaries. By the time I was 22, I was worth over $50 million. No one knew. I still lived in a modest off-campus apartment. I still drove a used car. Meanwhile, my family was self-destructing, with a few gentle nudges from me. I'd made sure Serena and Marcus got together. I'd accidentally forwarded an email to Serena from another girl Marcus was seeing, which sent Serena into a jealous rage. She confronted him, and the drama and passion of it all solidified their toxic bond. They became the campus's most dramatic, obnoxious power couple, funded entirely by my father. My father. That was my masterpiece. I knew from my past life that his business partner, Frank, was embezzling. In the past, my father found out, and the ensuing scandal nearly ruined him, but he salvaged the company. This time, I didn't let that happen. I used a voice modulator and a burner phone to call Frank. "Richard's on to you," I whispered. "He's hired a forensic accountant. They start on Monday." Frank panicked, just as I knew he would. He didn't just skim, he liquidated everything he could, wired it to an offshore account, and was on a plane to the Cayman Islands before my father even got to the office on Monday. My father's company didn't just falter, it imploded. It was a spectacular front-page news collapse. He was left with nothing but mountains of debt and a ruined reputation. The bank foreclosed on our family home. My parents, Serena and Marcus, who had practically moved in, were forced into a cramped, ugly rental apartment. The first call came a week later. It was my mother. "Alara," she said, her voice strained and fake cheerful. "Darling, we've had a spot of bad luck. Your father's company. Well, there was a misunderstanding." "I read about it, Mom," I said, sipping a $100 a bottle tea in my penthouse apartment, which I'd finally bought under an LLC. "It sounds terrible." "It is, darling, it is. We're a bit tight on money. And I was thinking, you're always so good at saving. We just need a small loan to tide us over." "Gosh, Mom, I'd love to help, but all my money is tied up in student loans. You know, since you couldn't co-sign for me." A lie. I had no loans. I'm barely scraping by. But what about the trust fund?" she sputtered. "Your grandmother's money. You're almost 23. Can't you get it early?" "Oh, no," I said, feigning shock. It's ironclad. Not until my 25th birthday. You know that. Grandmother's rules." There was a long, cold silence. "Right," she finally said. "Right. Well, just see what you can do." She hung up. They were all counting on it. My bankruptcy, Serena's lavish wedding to Marcus, my mother's gambling debts, they were all pinning their hopes on my 25th birthday. They were waiting just as they had in my past life for the payday. This time, I was waiting too. I met Liam when I was 23. It was at a tech conference where I was, for the first time, giving a keynote speech as myself, the mysterious founder of my company. He wasn't a fawning investor. He was a competitor, the CEO of a rival firm. He came up to me after my speech, his eyes sharp and intelligent. "You didn't predict that market shift," he said. "You knew it was going to happen. I want to know how." He was the first person to see that my genius wasn't just analysis, it was certainty. We had dinner, then another. He was brilliant, he was kind, and he was, to my relief, independently wealthy himself. He wasn't attracted to my money, he was attracted to my mind. I told him everything, not the rebirth. He would have thought I was insane. But I told him about my family, the abuse, the neglect, the attic room, the stolen money, the sabotage. He listened, his expression growing darker and darker. When I was finished, he just took my hand. "They will never, ever hurt you again," he said. It wasn't a platitude, it was a vow. We got engaged a year later, on my 24th birthday, on a private beach in Bali. He presented me with a ring holding a flawless blue diamond. "To match the color of that ribbon you won," he said, "the one they threw away." I wept. For the first time, they were tears of pure joy. When we got back, I knew I had to make the call. It was part of the plan. I dialed my mother's number. "Alara, is something wrong?" she answered, her voice immediately suspicious. "No, Mom, everything's great. I wanted to let you know that Liam and I are engaged." Silence, then a sharp, barking laugh. "Engaged? Don't be ridiculous. You're not even 25 yet." "I'm 24, Mom." "Whatever. We're a bit busy, Alara. Your father is very stressed. And Serena is finally planning her wedding to Marcus. Now that's an event. They're trying to find a venue that will take payments. We simply can't be bothered with your little parties." "Oh," I said, my voice dripping with false disappointment. "It's just, we're having a small engagement party this Saturday at the St. Regis." I was hoping. "The St. Regis? How can you afford that?" "Are you in debt?" "Alara, you cannot take out loans against the trust fund. We are counting on that money. Your sister's wedding—" "It's fine, Mom." I cut her off. "I understand. You're busy, it's fine. Don't worry about it." "Good," she said, relieved. "Now about your birthday, your 25th. We'll be there. We'll pick you up at 9 a.m. sharp. We'll all go to the lawyer's office together. As a family." "Okay, Mom," I said. I'll see you then." I hung up. I looked over at Liam, who was listening on speaker, his face a mask of cold fury. "I let them skip it," I said, a slow, icy smile spreading across my face. I'd recorded the entire call. "Are you sure you're okay, my love?" he asked. "I've never been better," I said. "Now let's go plan our party." The small engagement party was an explosion. We flew in Liam's entire wonderful, loving family from 3 continents. We booked the entire rooftop ballroom of the St. Regis. I wore a custom-made Oscar de la Renta gown. The party was a who's who of the tech and finance worlds. It was featured in Vogue, Forbes, and every high society blog in the country. The headlines read, "Tech's most elusive billionaire, Alara Vance, finally steps out, and she's engaged." My family, buried in their world of payday loans and creditors, never saw it. They didn't read Forbes. They weren't in that world. They were just waiting for my birthday. The day arrived, my 25th birthday, the day I had died. I was in the lobby of my apartment building, a place my family had never seen. I was sitting on a plush velvet couch, sipping a macchiato. Liam was in a car outside waiting. At 9 a.m. sharp, the glass doors burst open. There they were. My father, his suit rumpled, his face gray with stress. My mother, her cheap clothes belying her predatory, excited expression. And Serena, clinging to Marcus's arm, both of them vibrating with greed. "Alara!" my mother trilled, rushing forward. "Happy birthday, darling. You look good. This place is nice." She looked around, her eyes narrowing, calculating. "Mom, Dad, Serena, Marcus," I said, my voice calm. I didn't stand. Well, let's go, Serena snapped, tapping her foot. The lawyer's office, chop chop, we've got a wedding to pay for. We're not going anywhere, I said. Their smiles froze. What do you mean? My father asked, his voice cracking. I mean, we're not going to the lawyer's office, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. There's no need. What did you do? My mother shrieked, her mask of civility vanishing. Alara, what did you do? The trust fund, I said, was dissolved 2 years ago. The color drained from all four of their faces. They looked, I thought, like I must have looked on my deathbed. You can't, Serena screamed, her voice echoing in the marble lobby. It's not allowed. It's family money. It was grandmother's money, I corrected. And her will was very specific. It stated that I could, upon demonstrating significant maturity, sound financial judgment, and independence from outside influence, petition her lawyers to have the funds transferred into a new trust under my sole control, which I did. 2 years ago? My father whispered. When Frank... The day after your company collapsed, actually, I said brightly. I used its spectacular failure as Exhibit A for outside influence. The lawyers were very understanding. You bitch! Serena lunged at me, her nails bared like claws. A man I hadn't seen, dressed in a sharp suit, stepped between us. I wouldn't, he said, in a calm, deep voice. Who are you? Marcus demanded, trying to puff out his chest. My head of security, I said, and also my private investigator, who, by the way, has compiled some fascinating files. I gestured to my investigator, who handed each of them a thick-bound folder. What is this? My mother spat. That, I said, is a lawsuit. For you, Mom, it's for the $14,000 you stole from me over the years, plus interest, and for pawning $80,000 worth of my grandmother's jewelry. For you, Dad, it's a file detailing your own creative accounting, proving that you were the one embezzling, and Frank was just your fall guy. I've already sent a copy to the SEC. My father turned a shade of purple I had previously thought impossible. And for you, Serena, I continued, it's proof of fraud. All those loans you and Marcus took out in my name, expecting to pay them back with my trust fund? Yeah, the banks are very interested in that. Marcus, yours is in there too, along with a restraining order. If any of you come within 500 feet of me, my husband, or my properties ever again, you'll be arrested. Husband? Serena choked out, her face pale with shock. You're not... Oh, right, I said, standing up and flashing my hand. The blue diamond glittered under the lobby lights. That engagement party you couldn't be bothered with? It was real, so was the wedding. I pointed to the large newsstand in the corner of the lobby. The front page of the Wall Street Journal had a small picture of me and Liam. But the cover of Hello magazine, which had just hit the stands that morning, was a full-page spread. It was me, in a breathtaking Vera Wang gown, standing on a beach in Tahiti, kissing Liam. The sunset was behind us. We looked happy, truly incandescently happy. The headline was simple: a new dynasty inside the surprise wedding of billionaires Alara Vance and Liam Alastair. My mother picked it up. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold it. She stared at the photo, at the picture of the life she could have had, the wealth she had thrown away. You told us... You said... She stammered, looking at me, her eyes finally full of a dawning, comprehensive horror. You told me you were busy, I said, my voice as cold and clear as a winter morning. You told me you were planning Serena's wedding. You told me my engagement was a little party. You made your priorities very clear. So I made mine. Alara, please, my father begged, his bluster gone, replaced by the pathetic whimper of a broken man. We're your family. No, I said, the word of final clean cut. You're just the people who were counting the days until my death. I turned my back on them. I walked past the security guard, who was already on the phone, likely with the police. I walked out of the glass doors and into the bright, warm sunshine. Liam was waiting for me, the car door open. I got in, and he took my hand. Is it done? He asked, his voice soft. It's done, I said. We drove away. In the rearview mirror, I could see my family standing on the sidewalk, clutching the files that would ruin them, staring at the magazine cover that showed them what they had lost. They were small and pathetic, and they were finally out of my life. We flew to our private island that afternoon. I turned off my phone. I didn't read the news articles about my father's arrest. I didn't follow the court proceedings as Serena and Marcus were found guilty of fraud. I didn't care when I heard my mother had to take a job as a cashier, her hands, once manicured, now raw and chapped. I was too busy. I was swimming in the turquoise water with my husband. I was funding new medical research. I was building new companies. I was living. Years later, I saw a picture of them. It was in one of those "Where Are They Now" articles about my father's corporate scandal. My mother looked old, bitter, and tired. My father was still in prison. And Serena, she was working as a waitress in a cheap diner, her golden hair dull, her beauty faded, her eyes empty. The article said she'd never married. I looked at the photo for a long moment. I felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, not even satisfaction. Just nothing. They were strangers, ghosts from a life that was no longer mine. I closed the browser, kissed my husband, and went to go read a bedtime story to my daughter, my beautiful, bright, dark-haired daughter. Her name was Alara, and I was going to make sure she knew, every single day, that she was anything but frail.